Elon Musk and X, formerly known as Twitter, they now have an AI chatbot. It was a fake headline that it generated about Iran attacking Israel. But then the algorithm of X amplified it.
Nobody seen Terminator.
Nobody seen Terminator. Am I the only one, bro? Like, I'm scratching my head. Like, Aoki Lee, who is the 21-year-old daughter of Russell Simmons and Kimora Lee. She's now dating an old rich white guy. I'm not necessarily up in arms, but I got a lot of thoughts on this one.
We are millions of light years away here.
The idea of spending romantic time with a 20-year-old woman literally gives me a headache.
In a peer pressure kind of way, kind of force Cole to say something. I don't think Cole wanted to. He apologized, and what he found was lame. And if you understand and know J. Cole's character, is the fact that he knew in order to make this diss record, he had to lie.
We have been talking about the Diddy man for a while. Now you have a former employee who has filed a lawsuit alleging that Christian Combs sexually assaulted her. What up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome back to another edition of the Charles Coleman Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Coleman, and joining me today, got one of my favorites. So on the virtual couch, you know him, you love him, DJ to the 718 and beyond, Mr. Style Performance himself, DJ CEOs in the building. What up, bro?
What's happening with you, my guy?
Lot to talk about. We're going to get right into it, man. We've been talking a lot on the show about AI and AI and how it works. And I saw a story that was crazy. Elon Musk and X, formerly known as Twitter, they now have an AI chatbot that kind of sort of like works to improve its platform. I think it's called Grok or something like this.
Grok, something like that, yeah.
And there was a story, there was a fake headline that it generated about Iran attacking Israel.
Yes.
And shit went crazy because not only did the AI headline sort of generate and populate, but then the algorithm of X amplified it, so it started circulating even more. Am I the only one who feels like, have y'all not seen a science fiction movie in like the 80s ever or the 90s or the 2000s?
Nobody seen Terminator.
Nobody seen Terminator.
Nothing.
Like, this is Skynet, bro.
Yep.
Am I the only one, bro? Like, I'm scratching my head like, when are we going to get off this train?
We're not. And I'm going to tell you why. Because what's interesting is that I think the more technology advances, and I know we're talking about AI, but I don't think we could talk about the use of AI without talking about the socio-political, economic aspect of it. I think the more we advance the technology, the more we're getting closer to what the original intent of how America was supposed to look. And it's the haves and the have-nots, right? Because what's happening is, and so when I read the article, right, what's happening, Twitter had human beings in a position to write, like when they discover like what's trending or whatever, then they'll construct like quick summaries of like what this is, so you can kind of whatever. Soon as Elon Musk got a hold of it, boom, got rid of it. And so what happens is, like, we're not even just looking at the usage or how X works, but now you have hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, out of work.
Yeah.
Right. And I said this before, you get rid of the middle class, you will have a revolution sooner or later, because the middle class keeps the peace. And so when I look at how AI is being used, like, yeah, the fact that it created a headline and a story that didn't exist is scary enough, right? And you would assume that how the AI is programmed is maybe predictability, even though this particular AI program shouldn't be based on predictability if the whole point is to share the news, right? But if it was programmed to deal with predictability, the idea that an attack like that would happen isn't far-fetched.
Well, for context, what happened was there were Israeli strike zones that killed 2 Iranian generals a few days prior to this actually happening. So to your point about predictability, it's not the craziest thing in the world, especially in that context.
Yes.
It's still deeply problematic, but to your point, it's not the wildest thing that we've ever heard.
No. It wasn't like I saw Biggie and Michael Jackson walking down the street.
Right.
Like, it's not that. So
is Elon Musk like, I'm just gonna call it, is Elon Musk the devil? Like,
no, but he is, but what he does represent
the devil.
No,
he's not the devil himself. He's just a representative.
No, please understand this. Like, they talked about it a lot. How like the kids that we made fun of in the 80s and the 90s, the Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
like, they're the ones that run the world now.
They're like, yo, we coming back for everything that's ours. Word.
And they run the world based on how they see it and how they exist and how we socialize. Like, they were never not socially awkward. They were never not. So everything they've created is to represent the comfort that they need. Like, they don't, it's about less human interaction and more just, that's their norm.
It's like they took everything from when they were adolescents in terms of their development and the things that made development challenging for them. They have now created a world where all of that's optional.
Yes.
Where you can navigate around it, right? Like, I wish I really didn't have to go introduce myself to people. Now you don't. Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no. I wish I had an alternative. Like, literally, I don't want to go play sports. I would rather go sit. I wish I could just take my computer everywhere I go and just work on that. Now you can't.
Or if I like a girl, I would like to be able to like her without having to deal with the rejection. Or vice versa, right? Because if all you have to do is double tap or hit the heart button, like, that's for them, that's shooting a shot, and they don't have to deal with any rejection.
Craziness, absolute craziness. A story I want to talk about. Is it Aoki Lee?
I don't know how to say her name.
I believe it's Aoki Lee, who is now dating. She is the 21-year-old daughter of Russell Simmons and Kimora Lee Simmons.
I'm sorry, it's Aoki. That is
Aoki. I'm sorry.
Aoki.
I apologize for your name, Aoki. Aoki Lee, who is the 21-year-old daughter of Russell Simmons and Kimora Lee Simmons, or Kimora Lee, formerly Kimora Lee Simmons. She's now dating a man in his 60s, his mid-60s, who is a restaurateur. He's the founder of Serafina, rich white guy. All right. And the internet is up in arms. I'm not necessarily up in arms, but I got a lot of thoughts on this one. A lot of thoughts. I'll set the stage and see, once I do that, you just can jump in wherever you thought. All right. First and foremost, I honestly feel like a lot of people refer to R. Kelly and they refer to the pedophilia, the out and out pedophilia and predatory behavior of someone who had garnered a reputation for a pattern of preying on young women. What R. Kelly was convicted on and what he's currently in jail for is not pedophilia. It was human trafficking. It was a number of other things, but it was sex trafficking. But the minor stuff, in terms of, when I say minor, I'm talking about age. Those are the things he was acquitted by. Not saying he may or may not have done those things, but I just want to be clear in terms of where I'm going. I don't understand why we are using this false notion of, and when I say false notion, I'll explain what I mean, this appearance of consent to sort of like differentiate between these type of dudes and a R. Kelly. All right. But putting that aside for a moment, aside, there are a couple other jump off points that I want to introduce to the conversation. Number one, I think that we as a community have been very dangerous. We've dangerously flirted with and normalized this notion, this culture of sugar daddy. like sugar daddy culture in our community has become normalized in a way that I think is really dangerous, and it's served to normalize the transactional exchange of sex and money in relationships in a way that we are like promoting soft versions of sex work among our young people in terms of how our relationships are curated. And at the end of the day, like this notion of like, well, she's 21, so she can do what she wants. I find to be problematic. I mean, she can legally, but you're talking about somebody who is a 65. He's literally old enough to be her grandfather, especially in today's age.
Right.
But especially in today's age, he's old enough to be her grandfather. But bar none, he's old enough to be her dad. That's, to me, it's giving predatory. One way or the other, right? Like, and let me be clear, one way or the other. Predatory from him to her, or predatory from her to be like there's an old clip that surfaced. I don't know if you saw this. There was an old clip that surfaced where one of them they were on a live together, like Russell, Kimora, and what? How do you pronounce the name again?
Aoki.
Aoki. I'm sorry, Aoki. And she said to Russell, like, "Yo, if you ever cut me off, I'm just gonna get a sugar daddy." She says it's to her dad.
Right.
So when I say predatory, like, it's very plausible that she could have just went looking for, the same thing. I feel like we are really like doing a disservice to our young people. We are really teaching them some real effed up ideas about values and mores and relationships. But what do I know? I want to hear your thoughts.
It's a couple of things. I agree with you 100% on the predatory on both sides, right? Clearly, there's something that's kind of accepted when it comes to older men, right? Especially older men with money. We've accepted that their natural inclination is to go for younger women.
Yeah.
Right. And just from an aesthetic, yes. Even from an aesthetic point, like it's more of an aesthetic thing, right? It's the fact, young, pretty, body tight, all that, it's and also easily moldable, right? Because they're not set in their ways as yet, right? So there's that part, right? And then from her side, yeah. And I think to your point about the sugar daddy, I think even the definition of sugar daddy probably has changed. I think we naturally would think about sugar daddy and think young girl, older guy with money.
It's changed now, yeah.
But it's changed. And now it's just like you said, transactional. Like the women are just looking to receive some sort of financial compensation for time, like whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what this
time and
company, right? So it's predatory on both sides, and I agree with you 100%. It is very sad just to see the human experience, particularly when it comes to romance, kind of dwindled down to like this transactional thing. There has been talk, not that I necessarily subscribe to it, that Kimora is doing her best impersonation of
Kris Jenner.
Of Kris Jenner.
Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna hey, look, we gonna get to this money. Let's get to this money, right? So, I mean, it could be true. I don't necessarily know if that's the case. Nothing surprises me, but it would just seem like super hypocritical, especially after the entire blow up that they had with the family not too long ago, with Russ and the money and stuff like that. I just found it interesting that Russ, and not that I applaud him because he's ever been like superly righteous on every account, but when they spoke to him about it, he's like, yo, I have nothing to say. Because what can he say?
What can he say? He can't say anything.
He can't say anything. When he was dating Kimora, and I know people who in Queens who are from Hollis, who are from the area, who know Russell and whatever, remember him bringing Kimora around when she was like 14, 15, 16 years old. So,
yeah, like, I mean, I
he can't say nothing.
Well, yes and no. And here's why I say yes and no. I think I disagree that you can't say nothing, right? Because the idea of like, well, you did it, so on and so forth. I feel like that's exactly why I can say something. Because I did it and I know that it was wrong. It's not that you can't, to me, it's not that you can't say nothing. So you have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. You gotta be real, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't step in without acknowledging, you know what I'm saying, the way you was moving.
Yeah.
You can't just step into space and be pious and righteous, like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Why are you, what is this is a moral outrage. You have to be able to own your shit and be able to say, like, you know what? I walked down this road. It was not appropriate. I did this, I was in this space, and I realized that being in this space was exploitative and it was a problem. I think for me, the bigger issue is that beyond Aoki, because now I got the name right, like beyond Aoki, the bigger issue that I have is we don't have any sort of penchant for consistency. And we sort of try and navigate all of our conclusions around, all of our logic around the conclusions, like meaning that we will figure out where we want the conclusion to be or what we want the conclusion to be, and then we'll make the logic fit, as opposed to the right way, which is the other way around. Like, so it's like, this is the destination I want to get at in order to okay the behavior that I want. I want this behavior to be okay. So now I'm going to twist my logic whatever way I need to in order to get to the conclusion that I want. And that's a very dangerous space to be. I don't know if you saw, there was a story where Sexy Red was stopped. She was upset because she was stopped by security at a school.
At a school, right.
Because she was going to the school and she smelled like weed.
Yep.
Well, this is what the story tells me, bro. I don't want to hear all of this. This music is not for kids. It's entertainment for adults.
Right.
It's not for children. So these themes are not appropriate for them. So, but that's not who it's being marketed to. No. If Sexy Red, like, I ain't never had Keith Sweat or Keith Washington or Alexander O'Neal or Gerald Levert show up to my middle school.
Middle school, right? Because they're not
who's talking to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, it is.
Right, go in there. Again, with the consistency, we hear a lot of like, oh, that's not for them, so it's okay. Actually, it probably is, and this is evidence that is being marketed to them. So,
right, why would you even invite Sexy Red to the school? Is the
question.
The weed part is secondary. Like, why would you invite? If you've listened to this girl and her music, if you've watched her in interviews, her showing up smelling like weed, par for the course, right? And kids and children in general, we're going to go after the most wildest, dangerous, the thing that our parents say that we shouldn't have, shouldn't touch, shouldn't listen to, whatever.
We're going to rebel.
Right. On top of that, like, when you're young, like, you just naturally going to want to relate to something that's closer to your age. Like, you can kind of, even if there's no real connection, you try to find a connection. And so this is not on the children. It is completely on the adults. And the thing with, and to kind of bring it back to Aoki and her 65-year-old boyfriend, is that it's very clear that they both, not that their intentions aren't genuine, but it has nothing to do with love and happiness.
No.
Right?
No.
And I'm only 43, right? And I'm married. But even at 43, outside of like aesthetics, like, there's nothing that is attractive to me that will make me want to spend time with a 21-year-old. Like, because we are millions of light years away here.
As bad as it sounds, like, this is really benevolent, but it's really how I feel. The idea of spending romantic time with a 20-year-old woman literally gives me a headache. Like, gives me a headache.
And particularly these 21-year-olds.
What?
Like, 21-year-olds 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but that could very well be very different, right? We lived in a different time and whatever. But like, even then, there's a clear separation between a 21-year-old and somebody in their 40s, 50s, 60s, but it's 30s, whatever, right? But today, I feel like the separation is even greater.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, from a mental thing, conversations I've heard speaking with like younger cousins and whatever, like hygiene stuff, like everything. Like you don't realize how much you still grow and mature after 20 something.
Yeah, I realize it.
No, you do once you get older, but not in the moment. Like you
don't realize how much growing you still have to do.
Right.
At that age.
You
don't realize how much growing you still have to
do. Right. So you 21. When you 21, the chick that you slept with that was like 21, 22 probably did not have the greatest hygiene in the world.
You didn't wash your ass good.
You didn't care.
You didn't wash your ass good.
Yeah, you didn't care.
And there are a lot, and in today's world, from what I'm hearing, from what I understand, there's a lot of 21-year-old guys who ain't really washing their balls good either.
That too. Yo, crazy. I don't want to direct it to the wrong person, but it's one of the young girl rappers that are out today. One of them said the reason why they wear black panties because they don't like to see the streaks. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? So like having knowledge of this, right? Say I wasn't married. Having knowledge of this, I don't go, that's just that one girl. No. If you're doing this, there's a lot of 21-year-olds that think the same way. And it's like I don't get it, yo. I just don't get it.
It's not for us to get. It's not for us.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I think, circling back though, I think that the Aoki Lee conversation has a lot greater implications than like her just dating a 65-year-old man. I think I'm not. It's not okay for us to just be like, oh, that's disgusting, and then just walk away from it. I think like we have to have a serious conversation about how we are. The messages we're sending to young people about what relationships are, what they're supposed to do, and like whether that setup, if you will, is the best situation that's conducive to getting the types of things that you want. Now, if you're going to use money, for example, as and then a lot of people were like, well, she comes from money. That don't mean that because her father has bread, that don't mean that she's just rolling in the dough right now.
Right now.
You don't even know what that financial situation is. You don't know how much access she has to it. So pipe down. And the only thing that people with money want is more money. So just pipe down.
Relax.
All right? Because I know I can see those in the comments already. Gonna switch gears. And I'm glad you're on for this one.
Mm-hmm.
King Kendrick.
Yep.
Jermaine Cole.
Mm-hmm.
And Aubrey.
Aubrey's secondary in this whole
Aubrey is an afterthought to this.
Afterthought, right.
Yeah, Aubrey's an afterthought. So obviously Kendrick puts out a flames verse on this record with Metro Boomin and Future. And it's nuts.
Right.
And he does what he does when he goes on his tirades. Nobody's safe. Everybody can get it. So he sprays everybody. Well, he doesn't spray everybody, but he specifically sprays Cole and Drake.
Mm-hmm.
So now Jermaine Cole comes back on, 7-minute warning, 7 miles,
7-minute drill.
7-minute drill on 7-minute drill.
Mm-hmm.
And he drops on 7-minute drill a diss track.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 days later, after he drops it,
mm-hmm.
he's on stage at a show and he basically says like, yo, I apologize. That's not who I want to be. Not like I take it back, but like I take it back.
Right.
We are both from the planet of hip hop. We are both students of hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's in our blood. You are someone who knows the industry backwards and forwards, and has a different take on music. What is your let's start with the actual records themselves, and then let's talk about your reaction to J. Cole's recanting of his diss track.
So Kendrick, it's so weird. I don't think Kendrick dissed or shitted on or even got at Cole or Drake. I think what he did was intentionally separate himself and saying like, which is very much hip hop. He was like, fuck the big three, it's just big me. Like, it's not that these niggas are whack and they suck.
I'm the king by myself.
Right, I'm the king. It's just me, which is very hip hop. So he didn't do that, but I think the energy behind it, right, from the public, from it almost seemingly coming out of nowhere, like, fam, why are you even saying this, right? All of that, right? I think in a peer pressure kind of way, kind of forced Cole to say something. I don't think Cole wanted to, right? Because if you really look at it, he didn't diss them. He just said it's just me. He gave him one bar, right? Just one bar.
Well, he gave him more than one bar.
But the only thing that anybody hangs on is
that's the biggest thing people hang on. A lot of cookies with a check for all my dogs. He made a few references, more so to Drake than to Cole.
Right? But Cole did not want to do this, right? In a sense that I think he first of all understood like he ain't really like shit on me, but then two, like how do you really? I think I'm gonna get to the apology. Cole's apology was not that he did a diss record, right? If everything he said in that record was true, there would be no apology. He apologized, and what he found was lame. And if you understand and know J. Cole's character, is the fact that he knew in order to make this diss record, he had to lie. And that's not who Cole is.
What did he lie about?
About Kendrick's resume and his record. Like saying this, like he had, like, what are you going to say about Kendrick? You can't say he's not nice. You can't not say all his albums are fire. Like he has very little flaws that are like known for like you to kind of dig at. So what did he do? He was like, he pulled he tried to pull a Jay, and what Jay did with Nas, and like your first album, this, that's my album. Right. Like that's what it was. It was a reference to that. But he knew he was lying. And I think for Cole, I think stands on principle. Cole stands on telling the truth. And even he kind of like pokes fun at it on one of the tracks on the album where he says something about carrying a gun. And he's like, I'm lying, but since I found out the lying really doesn't matter, I'm just go ahead and like do it anyway. Like, but I think just in this, I think in a battle rap, I think what benefits each MC is that you kind of come from a place of truth. And I think he understood, like, yo, everything I said was like bullshit. Like, this is a lie. Like, that shit is lame. So I think he apologized for how he went about it, not that he engaged in the competition, because I think J. Cole always wants all the smoke. I just felt like he realized he got pulled into some shit that there was no reason for him to be in.
Does that make him so let me ask you this, because I can see that perspective. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I can see that perspective. Not necessarily like I'm not afraid to have smoke with no rapper.
Right.
I just need it to be a certain way. Like it needs to be rooted and grounded in truth. I can totally understand that perspective. I guess my question to you is, does that sort of admission, given that, okay, so let me ask you, do you think that the public is going to understand that without it being explained?
No.
Okay.
The public likes Sexy Red. The public is not going to get that. They're not going to get that.
So we know that the public is not really going to understand that perspective, like assuming that's rooted in some sort of accuracy. Mm-hmm. Given that the public is not likely to really understand that, does J. Cole get more points for the record, or does he get more points for actually being really authentic and being like, that really wasn't where I wanted to go?
I would hope it's the latter. Because the record he did wasn't bad. The record was dope.
The latter requires that you understand everything that you just said.
I don't think he gets it now. I think this is something be hindsight 2020 for the public, right?
Okay.
To kind of look back and kind of be like, you know what? How J. Cole moved. But there's a reason, again, like for him to do something like that, there's a reason why we this big three discussion. And truth be told, and it's actually weird, right? Because when it was the Biggie, Jay-Z, and Nas, right? Like the legitimacy was clearly centered around the talent and also how we view these rappers like as people, like their authenticity, how likable they are, right? And then like this big three discussion now with Kendrick, Drake, and Cole. We're starting to notice that there's a separation. It's really like it's these two and then this other guy. Because Drake, I think, is a really good artist. I think Drake is a great artist.
He occupies a distinctly different space than the two.
Different space than these two. Like when we talk about, and it's not like, I mean, unfortunately, Drake does have this black cloud around him about if he's penning everything that he's done, right?
Right.
But whatever the case may be, you can't say that Drake is lyrically whack. He's just not on the same level as these two.
No.
And so even in the public, like forget the battle itself, even in the public, there's becoming a clear separation. It's like it's Cole and Kendrick. And then Drake is kind of he's in his own thing, but even though he's in his own lane, he's not above them.
I made this analogy a while ago and people sort of like, I think you understood it. I feel like just not necessarily in terms of lining up who they are, because that doesn't align, but in terms of how we process this discussion. In basketball, we always are like LeBron or MJ, MJ, LeBron, LeBron or MJ, MJ or LeBron. And then people are like, but what about Kobe? Mm-hmm. And then like Kobe like sits in this weird sort of like space where it's like, well, why? He's not it's never LeBron or Kobe or MJ or Kobe. It's always MJ or LeBron, but there's no real reason why he gets left out, but he does get left out. And so it's the same model for the Kendrick, Drake, J. Cole thing. Like, I mean, there are reasons for it, but it is like this thing like I don't necessarily, and this is why, this goes back to my question that I sort of like have gone back and forth about is like, is Drake hip hop?
He very much is. I think the discussion of is Drake, to me, is absurd. Drake is very much hip hop. We have to also understand that.
I think Drake, like Beyonce, is evolving into his own sort of space where like he's his own thing.
But here's the difference. He was
hip hop. Again, just like Beyonce was R&B. She was R&B at one point. She was pop at one point. But now she's her own animal. Drake is his own animal musically.
Here's the thing. Hip hop has permeated through so many different genres, right? R&B isn't even R&B anymore. R&B is hip hop. Like the R&B that we get today is a hip hop version of R&B. Yeah. It's not
Mary J. Blige and
right.
Daddy.
Exactly, right? So it's not just R&B. Beyonce is an artist, period. Just kind of how we looked at Mike as an artist. We didn't, like Mike did early on in his career, as a child, he went through like the whatever that pop R&B was with his brothers. And then he went into the disco and then went into his like R&B funk. And then he sort of like created like his own sound, right? Beyonce did the same thing. Prince did the same thing. Stevie, so definitely to a point, did the same thing, right? And I think we see the same thing with Beyonce. And with Drake, I don't think Drake has ever created his own sound. I think what Drake, which I don't give him credit for, and I feel like gets too much flack for, is that he makes attempts, and pretty good attempts, I'll say, at different styles and genres that exist. And what he does is shed light to it, right? And then people, like, he was like the first hip hop artist that I knew that was really like, all right, I'm going to do this Afrobeat thing. And there were people, because unfortunately people have a horrendous toxic relationship with music these days, they would probably on their own wouldn't have went to go check out Afrobeat artists. Yeah. But because of Drake, he brought them in. I think Beyonce does the same thing. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he is hip hop, because hip hop has less to do about the music and about the character and culture you are, right? And another thing, hip hop has always been like keep it real, keep it real. To be honest, I think there's nobody keeps it more real than Drake. We just don't like what his real looks like.
That's a very
Right?
good point. I mean, when you come to somebody who's like, authentically them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think part of what happens is we have to. Part of what happens is, like you said, you don't like the ways in which he keeps it real, and part of that is because he's not limited in scope in the same ways that so many other artists are and so many other people are. So he
Right.
legit could, like, I started on Degrassi. I can make music. I can rap. I can sing. I was down with Young Money, but you know what I'm saying? I can do all. And
I'm hypersensitive, which is wild.
Most people don't got that range.
Right.
When they see it and they see it being done, and they would get ostracized for it. Like, stop crying, little bitch. They would get ostracized for it. But he's on stage balling, and he gets like applauded for it. Like it hits different. It hits
right. You see what I'm saying? So he gets penalized for doing exactly what we say we want, and it's like we're hypocritical. It's like is keeping it real being like a thug, or is this keeping it real being true to who you are? And if that's the case, you can't say he's as hip hop as it gets. Like, he is authentically him all the time. And I just think people don't like the him that he is. And that's fine too.
So speaking of music, we're going to move on. Cause I mean, I do think your point about, the reason behind the J. Cole apology makes a lot of sense. And it's a very important nuance that people need to understand. Like, cause people are like, oh, hip hop is dying. So hip hop is not dying in that sense. He just knew that, like, in the spirit of hip hop, in the spirit of authentic hip hop, what he did, he felt like wasn't speaking to that.
Right.
Yeah. And so he was like, shit was like, it was whack, it was goofy.
Yeah.
And I also very much so think and believe that he looked at it like, I got myself sucked into some BS.
Yeah. Yeah.
That normally I would have just let fly. I let the internet, and personally, this is my last sort of piece on this. Personally, I don't think that it was the strongest J. Cole record or the record he's strongest, his strongest diss record. I think that part of the reason for that was because he really wasn't in it like that. He was just like, it felt very like, all right, I'm not like, really trying to lay you out. Speaking of music, we have been talking about the Diddy man for a while, and there's another suit now that has been filed by a person who is a former worker on one of the yachts that Diddy charted. Same yacht fest that Lil Rod basically filed his lawsuit on, where he said Cuba Gooding Jr. got at him and all this other kind of craziness was on the boat. Now you have a former employee who has filed a lawsuit alleging that Christian Combs sexually assaulted her. It tacitly alleges that, without any evidence, that other than the accusations themselves, that she may have not have been drugged during what happened. Now, she's a bartender. She said he made her drink tequila. He followed her. Does not accuse him of rape, if I'm not mistaken. But here's the thing. This is some inside baseball real quick, because there was something about this that jumped out that I want people to start paying attention to. Because either this is going to really flame out quick, or this is about to get exposed. The lawyer for Lil Rod and for this person, this new victim or survivor, is a guy by the name of Tyrone Blackburn Esquire. He's a lawyer. You can Google him. He's a young brother. A couple weeks ago, probably about a month ago, maybe a little more, anywhere between 3 and 5 weeks, probably closer to 5 weeks, I got an email. It was a fraternity brother of mine who reached out, who said, like, yo, it's a good bro I know from California who wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I take the call, and he asked me if I knew this attorney. I didn't know him at the time. I hadn't heard of him. And he said, yo, this guy is like really brazen with the demands. And I said, let me look him up. I looked
Mm-hmm.
him up, and this dude, it's this guy, Tyrone Blackburn. He's a young dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he's young because number one, I can see it, but then number two, because in this space, I'll give you some perspective. There are approximately 50,000 people who graduate from law school in the United States every year.
Mm-hmm.
There are less than 50,000 black attorneys in the United States of America. So think about that. Like, I tell people that all the time. They're like, really? I'm like, go look it up. Think about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can't keep up.
That's like one attorney every 50 years. Like,
correct, right? Like, so you might know 10 black attorneys, but like in the midst of these big red states, for example, where there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of attorneys, and like, one of us for every literally 250 attorneys that are out there, if not higher. The community kind of knows each other. Like,
right.
Especially people who was, and like the 50,000 I'm talking about, that's everybody who's alive. So like, you know what I'm saying? So the people who are like actively practicing, who are like, in courtrooms doing stuff, like we be knowing each other. Like, it's not that big of a community, bro.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew like, oh, this dude is new. And he was like, yo, this dude is brazen. And he's like really coming with like crazy, crazy demands. Where am I going with this? Well, at least on the civil side, he didn't represent Cassie. He represents this guy, Little Rod. He's representing this new victim or survivor again. But where I'm going with this is he was reprimanded and referred to the bar by a judge for filing improper lawsuits for the purposes of getting media coverage and then forcing people to settle. So apparently, and the only thing he could say in response to the fact that, first of all, for you to be a new attorney and referred to the bar for sanctions by a judge is crazy. I just want you to know that is crazy.
Okay.
That's like, that's just like it's a really bad look. A really, like for a private individual to refer you to the bar is a really bad look. For another attorney to refer you to the bar is a terrible look. For a judge to refer you to the bar is really, really serious and really, really, really bad, which means that your conduct had to be so egregious that an actual judge said, nah, they gotta deal with you. The only thing he could say in response to that was a referral's not a sanction. Ladies and gentlemen, so basically he said, oh, it's just an accusation that ain't been proven yet.
Yeah, wow.
What I'm gonna say to you, ladies and gentlemen, is keep your eyes on this, because it really seems like this dude is a young gunner, ambulance chaser who feels like he found a magic formula, and it's not gonna end well for him. It's not gonna end well for him because everybody ain't about that settlement life. And even those people who are, this is going to catch up to you, homeboy. And it's not a good way to build a business or practice. And so when I saw that, I said, this is a very interesting wrinkle. It has nothing to do with his criminal charges. This is all on the civil end. It's not even to say that some of what may be alleged didn't happen. It's to say that this is not the type of detail that you want associated with your case if you're the plaintiff at all.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that, the legal team for the Coleman's, right? Their money's long, so they get a whiff of this. Like, you definitely not getting a settlement, and because your clients, because this new guy, his clients can't afford to keep up with whatever. So like, yeah, that doesn't look like it's going to end well for them at all.
Well, the only thing is, and I'm giving you some sort of like inside baseball, free legal sort of mind on this one. You have to in terms of like not getting a settlement, you have to be able to withstand the initial media storm. Mm-hmm. So when this trial, when the case comes out and it drops, it's going to get a lot of media attention. You got to be able to like weather that storm until it dies down, and then just be like, all right, what do you want to do, right? Like that's the thing, and I think that the hope was in the midst of the Homeland Security raid on Diddy's home, mm-hmm. on the heels of the Cassie backlash, and other things that other people have been talking about. The hope was this avalanche of sort of media coverage is going to be too much, and it's just going to force him to settle. And it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like that's happening. And to your point, that's a bad look for this guy. So for those of you who are listening, pay attention. I encourage you to Google him. Tyrone Blackburn. Was it Blackburn? Black man? Let me see.
Also, just quickly, I mean,
Tyrone Blackburn.
When everything was like hitting, when everything was really just coming out, starting from Cassie and moving forward, and even with the raids and stuff, we didn't see or hear much from Diddy at all. Like he
still haven't.
He has been more frequent on social media as of late.
A little bit.
And so, but even that little bit, I mean, it could be something strategic coming from the legal team, like, hey, don't look like you rattle, like maybe post a little something, post some family stuff or whatever, try to get the public on your side. But also in general, the energy that's coming from him, like he had posted the victory video. It just says to me without him like saying, like I got something. It almost feels like I'll be all right. Like it's, what I'm saying. Whether my opinion or even the public opinion of what he's done or hasn't done is neither here nor there. Just from a legal standpoint and where he feels like he can win and he'll be able to get out of this, he seems to be, as of late, over the past couple of weeks and just seeing certain posts, he just seems to be really comfortable. And to me, I would just assume he feels like we're going to get out of this.
Last thing I'm going to say on this and before we get out of here is, I said this to Kurt, and I'll pose it to you and to our audience just to think about. Do you really think that Diddy is the biggest fish in every pond that he swims in?
Of course not.
Exactly. Of course not. Why does that matter? It matters because for as much as you might think Diddy is a big fish, he knows way bigger fish. Mm-hmm. And he's into everything and has somebody in every space. So whether it's gaming, drugs, sex trafficking, name the industry, organized crime. Mm-hmm. I know somebody.
Yep.
And I can flip on a lot of somebodies. And so if I really want to get on my Nino Brown, this thing is bigger than Puff Daddy.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, right, the tables switch around legally. I'm speaking as a former prosecutor here, and Diddy has more leverage than you actually thought. That doesn't mean that he's going to get away scot-free. That doesn't mean that he's going to get charged with everything or anything. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying from a perspective standpoint is you have to understand that Diddy, because of who he is, was in a space and is in a space where he's got a lot of information about a lot of people that would be of significant interest to law enforcement. So if he's willing to trade that to save himself and potentially his kids or, those around him, mm-hmm. he gonna do it. He gonna sing like Patti LaBelle, and that's what's gonna happen. Anyway, this has been a really good impromptu episode of the Charles Coleman Podcast. Make sure you check us out every week. Follow us, share us, YouTube, Spotify, all the places, Apple Music, Amazon Podcast, Google Podcast, Pandora. We all the way up like air. This is your new home for Black Brilliance. I'm your host, Charles Coleman Jr., and that's my man, DJ CEO, the DJ for the 718 and beyond, Mr. Silent Performance himself. We will check y'all next week. But until then, peace.